Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawm at-tawab. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana li hadha wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His ni'mah and for His favors upon us as Muslims. And we thank Him for this moment and the discussions that we are going to have today. When we met last week, at the end of the discussion, we were talking about the logistics that we will have in terms of having our sisters make the presentation today. Islam never prohibited sisters from speaking in the masjid. The kind of talk that is heard is what Islam discusses, talks about. During the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we are aware of women who asked questions and spoke in the masjid. We are aware of Umar bin al-Khattab giving a khutbah talking about mahar and how, women are making mahar too expensive. This was in a khutbah, and a woman got up and challenged him. To say that, fear Allah, do not deny us of the right that Allah gave us. So, our discussion today, the format that we're going to have it, our sisters will be speaking from the sisters section, and we, the brothers, will be hearing them while we're facing here. So you can hear the sound without having to see them. So that's how we're going to have the format, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for whatever mistake or shortcomings we may have. And we have two presenters today. Sister Ndidid Okapu was supposed to be our first presenter. She's not here yet, so when she comes, we would introduce her. She says she's running late. The next presenter, therefore our first presenter, is going to be Sister Ngina Muhammad. The reason why we're thinking of Ndidid Okapu was because Malcolm X came before Warith Deen Mohammad. And Ndidid was going to make a presentation about Malcolm, and we wanted that to proceed. But since she's not here, we are going to have our Sister Ngina Muhammad to make the first presentation. As a way of introduction, when I asked her to give me something to say, she said, "Just say, I'm Ngina, my sister, your Muslim sister." But I would not rest there. The first time I met Sister Ngina was in August 1989. I was at WGCI to make a presentation on the radio, a talk show. And as I was waiting in the waiting room, here walks this man. And I went to him and said, "Excuse me, sir, you must be Imam Warith Deen Mohammad." And he said, "Yes." And there was this beautiful young sister following him. And he said, "This is my daughter, Ngina." After the presentation in 1989, Imam Warith Deen Mohammad offered to give me a ride home. You can't believe that he was driving himself. It wasn't a situation where he had a driver or anything like that. That's how humble he was. He was driving himself. He offered to give me a ride home. Told Ngina to move to the back, and I sat in the front with him. And after that, of course, I started writing for the Muslim Journal newspaper as the foreign correspondent for the Muslim Journal newspaper. And Ngina at the time was the ad manager. She was in charge of advertising. When you look in the Muslim Journal at that time, you see she say, "Ngina Muhammad, you know me." She wouldn't say anything more about herself. But she's the daughter of Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. And one other thing that I will say before I give her the floor. Imam Muhammad, when he was very, very sick, Ngina at that time was engaged to get married. And Imam Warith Deen Mohammad told her, if I'm not able to make it to perform your nikah, your wedding, please call Imam Misbah Rufai to come and perform your nikah. So before his death, Imam Warith Deen Mohammad told her to call me to perform her wedding. And so after he passed away, about 2 months later, she called me and said, this is what my father told me in the presence of my mother, that you should be the one to perform this nikah. I was shocked but honored. So I went and performed that nikah for Sister Ngina at that time, to show you the relationship that I had with her father. So my relationship with Sister Ngina has been mainly based on the love I had for her father and for the love that he had for me. And that love has translated into my relationship with especially Ngina and her sister, Sister Layla Muhammad. And that love also extended to their mother, Sister Shirley, who passed away last year. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of them, grant them Jannat al-Firdaus, and forgive them their shortcomings. And with this, I would give the floor to our sister, Sister Ngina Muhammad, the daughter of Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. And by the way, if anybody will know her father, she knew her father more than any of her siblings, because she was his daughter, his friend, his confidant. Wherever he was going, she was the one that was with him. Oh, I forgot to mention one most important part of Ngina. She may be embarrassed by this, but I'll say it anyway. Nobody in the family, and I'm saying this to show us how strong Iman is, our faith. Nobody expected Ngina, who is 56 years old today, nobody expected her to survive her 18th birthday. Nobody expected that she would live beyond her 18th birthday because of the illness that she had. Her 17th birthday, her father took her to Hajj. Ngina every day drank the Zamzam, took her bath with the Zamzam, every day making dua at Hajj. Every day, living, drinking, getting up with the Zamzam. And when she came back, because of her father's position, she was given a lot of the Zamzam too that they brought with them. Ngina, usually women don't give you their age, right? But the reason why we mention their age is to show you the ni'mah of Allah, that somebody who was not expected to live beyond 18 years is now 56 years old. Allahu Akbar. Takbir. Islam, and when you have Iman, when you make tawakkul, you put your faith in Allah, He will always come through for you. He will always come through. Allah never fails. It is we who doubt His mercy. And with that, I give the floor to my miracle sister, Sister Ngina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
First, giving honor and praise to all of the Muslims here at MASJID Al Farooq and Imam Osman for your gracious welcoming and the beautiful janazah you helped us give my mother just a couple months ago. I want to thank Imam Misbah Rafai for that wonderful introduction, but I do have to correct him on a couple of things. His memory is great, but he is very generous where it comes to me and my age. First of all, I wasn't expected to live beyond my 30th birthday. So it was 30 when my father took me to me and my husband, my brother is one. He didn't just take us. We went on a delegation, educational group, went over and made Umrah, not Hajj. And I was 30. But everything else is correct. I did drink Zamzam, washed with Zamzam, and yes, I was expected. All the physicians and specialty doctors had given me 1 to 10 years when I was just 19. And they confirmed it each year. They're like, oh, she's not going to make it. She's shutting down. But anyway, I returned. That was in 1995. So, Imam Misbahu, I am not 56. I will be 60 next year.
Subhanallah.
Yeah,
MashaAllah.
you're wrong about that one.
Double up. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. Thank you for the corrections.
No problem. I don't mind admitting my age. I'm very happy to say, and when he says illness, I don't want anybody to have any questions. I have systemic lupus erythematosus. If you ever want me to come back and talk about lupus, because it's very common around us women, especially women of color, especially African American women. Men have it too, but mostly women, 85% or something like that. And it affects my entire system. So it just moves around. So on any given day, today is a good day. Alhamdulillah. I'll get right to it. I didn't come to talk about myself. I want to, I'm not making any type of speech or informational scholarly thing here about my father, Imam W. Deen Mohammad. I'm here as his daughter, and you are like my family here. So feel free to stop me, question me, ask me. I see a lot of children running around. I want to speak on him as he was to me, my father, my daddy. Okay? So for me, my memory, the first thing, my first slide is the sisters can't see. Is there a screen behind me? No? Well, you would have to turn to see it. But my first screen is the Quran because that's how I remember my father, always with the Quran. And from earlier than 5, so I'm thinking maybe 3, 4 years old, my earliest memories of my father was either reciting Quran, reading Quran, or telling me about the Quran. And my favorite color was green, so we used to just talk about Quran, Quran, Quran. I'm going to give this brief history about his character and personality. Just as a person, I believe, even before he knew about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tried to live his life by the Quran and Sunnah. Period. I know people say that, but I witnessed it, and this is like to the T. Any type of hadith, he tried to incorporate that into his daily life. So a little history. This is my grandpa. My grandpa is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He another famous world leader who started in the United States of America and the founder of the Nation of Islam. But he was my grandpa, just my grandpa. And from a child, he never, treated us as any such. We came, we visit him, we see him play around. It's like the kids running around here in the masjid. That's how I know him. So that's how I want you to see him. And this is my grandma to the right. I didn't crop this picture. That's my auntie next to her. I don't have a pointer. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see it. My grandmother, Clara Muhammad. So Elijah and Clara are the parents of Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. There's a lot of history to that. I don't know if anyone is familiar or not with it, but my father was destined. I'm going to say destined. I don't believe in prophecies beyond Prophet Muhammad, of course. So someone said that he would be the next leader after my grandfather. And my grandmother supported that. When she was pregnant with him, they literally wrote his name on the wall, and that's how he became Warith Deen Mohammad. It was W-Deen, Deen, D-E-E-N, which is religion in Arabic. And they never knew what really the W was for. So on his birth certificate, they gave him Warith, the same name as the leader who wrote his name on the wall. I'm not going to go any further into that. I just wanted to mention, of course, when you're born, you have parents, and you have to honor them, and no person can ever be taller than their parent, no matter how tall in stature you grow, or no matter how big you think your brain is. You never look down on your parents. So I want to give honor to my grandparents before I speak on my father. There's a Duke University interview if you want to look further into it. It's online with Dr. C. Eric Lincoln and Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. It's very extensive about his relationship with his father and the many times he got excommunicated from the Nation of Islam and why. You can look that up. But I did want to mention a quote by Harper Lee, and she says, "A father is someone you look up to no matter how tall you grow." So Imam Warith Deen Mohammad lived his life in that manner, and although he vehemently disagreed a lot with his father, especially on certain points in the religion, especially about the presence of God, and they believe in that he came in the person. He questioned that from a very small age, like 6, 7 years old. He questioned it, and he begged Allah, as he was told was the name of God. He begged him. He's like, if I'm not seeing you, he looked at the picture on the wall that they said was God in the person, and he said, if I'm not seeing you in the right way, please show me, who you are. So he began his studies. That's my daddy there sitting on his mom's lap in a photo. That's my mother, Clara Muhammad, and my young dad. And here's a picture of him as a little bit older teenager with his father. This photo is shown a lot because in the background you see a photo on the wall, and that's the picture of the man that they believed at the time. I say they, but it's we. I was in the Nation of Islam too, a little baby. I was taught the same thing, that he was God in the flesh. And my grandfather chose this pose. He said, no, Wallace, you hold the Quran. The Quran is our holy Bible, our holy book. There's at least one Christian here I know. So I'm going to explain things I know you all know. But as our holy Bible, he said, no, you hold it, because in my membership in the Nation of Islam, we're not going to deal with this book right now. We know it's a holy book. We're going to keep it in the highest stations in our house. Don't touch it. Don't get it dirty. We're going to save it for when you take over or when you progress the community. It's a true Islam, inshallah. These are my father's siblings. I just thought it was a cute old-fashioned picture to show you guys. I can't believe they used to post like this, but it's like nobody wants to be there. Everybody's in these tight suits. So these are my uncles and aunts, all brothers and sisters of my father with Clara Muhammad. Before I progress to the next slide, I do want to mention that my father, when he got put out of the Nation of Islam, on 2 occasions he was a young minister preaching. And on 2 occasions it was for disagreeing with the doctrine of the Nation of Islam and basically disagreeing with his father. So he was put out. And when I say put out, I mean you couldn't come to the meetings, you couldn't communicate with anybody in the nation, not even your relatives. So as a child, that was really difficult for us because suddenly you'd see your cousins or whoever in jewels, and they would just turn their head. They couldn't speak to you. And I really struggled with that because I was a little, kid running around, want to hug my auntie, and we were out at the time. So that was something I just want to mention that was on my mind. Not saying good or bad, it just bothered me as a child. So the last time that my father was semi-put out was when he was accused of speaking with his very good friend. Being a young minister, my father became, I'm going to refer to him as my father. I hope does anybody have a problem with that? Or you want me to say Imam Warith Deen Mohammad every time? Okay. The sister said fine, so brothers accept it. So my father was friends with minister at that time, Malcolm X. And when I say friends, they lived in Philadelphia together. My mother was friends with his wife, Sister Betty. My sister, Layla, was born there, and she was friends or played with his eldest daughter, Attila. And when I say friends, they lived in a little apartment where, I forgot what they call those apartments where you share the common area, very intimate. So this was his friend, okay? So he spoke hostel. No, not a hostel. Not a hostel. Like a hostel. The hostels are more for college students and stuff. But they were, they were both married. Anyway, he shared some things with his friend that had already, according to my father, that had already heard it from someone else. And he was just calling to clarify. So if you ever watched the movie Malcolm X and, all that drama, or you watched any of these new documentaries, there was a lot of questioning around Malcolm X and my father's relationship. But from my father's mouth, that's all I can go by, and my mother's mouth, Malcolm came to him questioning my grandfather's relationships. And as son of my father, he clarified or denied whatever the information that was brought to him. So when Malcolm began speaking against my grandfather, I'm going to let Ndidid say more about Malcolm X when she gets here. Her presentation is on him. But I do want to say that my father, when he was brought to my grandfather and about to be put out again, my grandfather asked him directly, did you tell Malcolm this, da, da, da? And he said, well, no, he already knew. He told him the truth. And so once all of the terrible tragedy of Malcolm X being assassinated happened and the time was up, I think you had to be out for a year. So when that year was up, and by the way, my mother was pregnant with me, and Sister Betty was pregnant with the twins when he was assassinated. 65, I believe it was. Indeed, will clarify that stuff. So my father, when he came back, his father said, okay, I'm going to let you back. You're going to have to say something. Usually when you were let back into the Nation of Islam, You had to like admit your fault. Like I did this, I did it wrong, and this is why, and now I'm back. So my father was like, well, can I say what I want to say to his father? You know, I'll come before the, audience and I will say I'm back, but can I say what I want to say? So his father said, well, what you gonna say? So he was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna say that I should not have questioned the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I shouldn't have questioned him. And my grandfather said, okay, that's what we're going to do. So he went before the audience and said, I shouldn't have questioned him. And they accepted that, and they accepted him as his leader. My childhood home is right over off 88th and Cornell, right across Stony Island. So this is why my mother chose MASJID Al Farooq as her home for a time when she was able to walk from home to here before she moved into assisted living. And so that's why we feel like this is our home masjid. My father and mother were very playful parents, and we had lots of cats. I just wanted to mention that. So when my grandfather passed away, it had already been destined, I guess, or said that he would be the next leader. So they welcomed him and basically came in our home and swooped him up and transplanted us to Hyde Park, in a place where none of us children, I was 9, had only been to visit a couple times, but this was our new home. And my dad didn't last but a couple of weeks. He was like, this is not for me. I don't live like this in mansions. Surely we're going home. That is about all I want to mention with that. I'm going to get around. Okay, so after he was, I'm skipping this one. After he was in his position as the leader, the new leader of the Nation of Islam, I stumbled across, and I didn't bring it with me, at 9 years old, a Jet magazine with my daddy's picture on the front cover. I'm like, what the heck is this? You know, I kind of knew what was going on at 9. You kind of know what's going on, but I didn't know the gravity of the situation. You know, we would go through airports and people would stop us. They couldn't get to him, but they would stop us. There wasn't too much older than this little girl laying here, and literally asked me for my autograph. I'm like, what? So it was a really turmoil type world back then. Kennedy had been assassinated, Malcolm, you know, there was a lot of craziness going on. Martin Luther King, I'm calling people by their first names. I hope you don't mind that. But Martin Luther King, you know, President Kennedy, Malcolm X, and we, at the same time I'm seeing this picture of this jet, these Jet magazine pictures, I'm gonna keep it on there. We're ducking on the floor of that house over there because of drive-bys. There was a lot of turmoil in the Nation of Islam at that time. Some people didn't think he should be the leader. I was trying to go back to the other one. He shouldn't be the leader. The other one, like one more. Okay, yeah, that one. They thought he shouldn't be the leader, and one comforting scenario was our relationship with another very famous person. I had no idea, like I was probably 10 by then, was Muhammad Ali, another African American of recent. Um, so I'm just incorporating into how one small stature person, Honorable Elijah Muhammad, influenced so many people to greatness. Okay, so there's, you know, and greatness is relative. You know, you can't deny that Muhammad Ali was the greatest of all fighters, but Malcolm, people can dispute Malcolm's greatness, and they can dispute Minister Louis Farrakhan's greatness, and even my father's greatness. You know, other people can dispute that, but it's undisputable. Muhammad Ali was the greatest of all time. He would knock you out. So our relationship was that such that when he lost some big fight. I can't recall right now, and I'm not even looking at my notes. I'm just talking to y'all right now. When he lost, he brought his entire family to live with us. So suddenly, instead of living in this cold, dark mansion, they called it, I forgot, the big house or something, in the Nation of Islam. I finally have friends. Muhammad Ali's children are like maybe a year or two behind me, but my brothers and sisters, we got to play with his brothers and sisters. Muhammad Ali and my dad's relationship were so, I forgot how she did that. Anyway, it was so great that they were like big cousin, little cousin. They joked, played together, fought together, went to the gym, sparred together, everything. So while this young minister was leading a nation of people, while at the same time struggling to gradually bring them to true Islam, and some people might debate me on that too, but I don't believe that. This is just me. Okay, I don't believe the nation of Islam is true Islam. So, and from a small age, my father kind of taught us that way. You know, we went to the school, we went to university, and then we'd come home and we'd have class in the basement with a blackboard. And my father would go and he'd write Aleph, Ba, and Bait, and, you know, Kitab, and teach us our Arabic. At the same time, he would say, you know, you gotta learn your lessons, because this is the school you go to, but this is the truth. And that's why I had Quran as my first slide. While a young minister, he did pick up the flag. That's the previous slide. I keep advancing too fast. And that slide had him walking through the mosque at the time with the flag of the United States of America. That was very, very, very controversial. Which one? Youth. Okay. So this was inside of the mosque. And at the time my grandfather's passing, it was temple number 2, I think. He immediately took the chairs out of it, you know, because this is the way we had been living all our life. So I see some nodding here from some true pioneers. Thank you, giving me a little, like, I remember this, I was young, but I remember it this way. Took the chairs out, because we never had chairs in our prayer room on 87th Street. You know, I'm born in 65, we moved there in 70. So in 1970, we weren't living like this, you know, so he had to be true to himself and take the chairs out, and we put them in red, as you can see. But it was very controversial for him to walk in the masjid with that flag. So I just want to share with you his thinking behind that. A lot of people disagree with that, especially now. Today, I don't know if he would feel that way today, but at the time, he was very adamant on our community of Muslims that he was trying to bring forth to Islam to not disown your country where you live. There's a lot of, you know, Mark, I got it. Oh, I got a scholar here. Marcus Garvey saying, you know, we're going back to Africa. My father was like, look, we ain't going back. This is him talking to us in person, in the room, in the bedroom, you know, privately. We ain't going back to Africa no time. So Marcus Garvey never even made it to Africa. I need to get the people, my community, to embrace citizenship and following the laws of the land, so we won't keep going recidivism back into the prisons. You know, I need to, because in his defense, Nation of Islam, there was still a heavy crime element there that needed to be addressed. Okay, so a lot of people were converting, like Malcolm. They were basically felons or, you know, criminals, pimps, whatever, that had converted to Islam but didn't get that criminal element out of their life. So he worked really hard on that, and I think that's why he picked up that American flag. I think a part of his dawah was embracing the Christians. I'm not even going to talk about this picture, I just want you to know it.
He wanted to be a humanitarian and embrace all parts of the world, human beings. This is a picture that reminds me of every convention he had. So we had national conventions. He tried to move away from what is tomorrow, Savior's Day. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Nation of Islam, long before this millennium, has been celebrating February 25th. I'm looking to my people so y'all agree with me. Like, am I saying the right thing? Okay, February 25th as Savior's Day. He wanted to move away from that, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But this picture reminded me of a convention, and the convention, I'm going to go back again, the convention that I'm referring to might not even be that photo, but we had a convention in 2001, and the title, there's always some title over the convention, was We Are Muslims, We Are Americans. Okay, so we're still trying to enforce, we're Muslims first, but we do live in America, so we have to get our due here. And days after that convention, we started receiving a lot of FBI chatter and hate mail. Me being his assistant, it came all the time. It was nothing that worried us too much. My father, like Imam Warith said earlier, he drove himself around. He trusted in Allah and didn't need, he didn't need security. He trusted in Allah, and he knew it was a dangerous world. But we were getting more than usual FBI chatter. And a few days later, he was invited. Well, he was already invited, but he got on his American Airlines flight, American Airlines, in the morning of September 11th. I scheduled his flight to the Pentagon. He was headed there. That's why I got this picture of the Pentagon. My daughter asked me, why are you including that slide? They don't want to hear about 911, they don't want to hear about the Pentagon. No, but I want to tell you that. So he was scheduled to speak at the Pentagon September 11th in the morning. And he was on American Airlines flight. His flight landed, and the next American Airlines flight hit the first tower. So I'm sitting in my living room and watching it hit, and knowing that my dad took American Airlines flight, and I can't remember, fumbling through my, his appointment book, and I'm like, God, don't let that be my dad's flight. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you. It wasn't his flight. He landed, and immediately at the airport, he was in the airport seeing the prompters of the first tower hitting. So his security whisked him, and they said, oh no, we're gonna drive to Philadelphia, because that's his second home. I told you about Mohammed, which Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi indeed. My friend, basically, family member. We'll talk about that later. I digress. He was invited there to speak, so of course he never made a speech. They whisked him and said, we're going to drive to Philadelphia because that's the closest place. All the lines were down. I don't know if anybody remembers 911, but you couldn't get a call through. So when I eventually got a call through, they had driven all the way north to Philly, and then the second tower hit, and my father was like, take me home, drive me back to Chicago. So that's the type of person he is, that, it wasn't that he wanted to get home to his home. He wanted to get home to his people. He said, I need to speak to the members of the community. At that point, he was calling us. He did a lot of changing of wording through the years. We went from the Nation of Islam to American Muslim Mission to, he was a spokesman for human salvation. So at that time, he was calling us the believers, and nothing until he passed. But it's time to speak to believers, because we need to know how to act in this world, this new world. Because they're out there driving around in pickup trucks with Confederate flags, shooting Muslims, just for having your hijab on. So he came home, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, because he's here now, and I don't have to stop. Really advance. Yeah, so this is the next thing I see, the Pentagon, where my father was supposed to be speaking at the exact time when he was supposed to be speaking. And I didn't know that he was on the road to home. But so alhamdulillah. Back to what I mentioned earlier about him teaching me about the color green and the Quran. My father was very down to earth. There's no other word that I could use for that. Down to earth, humble, very in tune to the signs, the ayats in the nature. So I have this green tree. So as his mission progressed, he sat down in our kitchen and scribbled on some napkins, as he often did. He was an artist, so he would scribble doodle pictures of Mike Ditka. I don't know if you know who Mike Ditka is, but he was the coach for, head coach for the Bears at the time when they went to the Super Bowl, 1985. My father sat down and scribbled a sketch of him and sent it to Ditka, and he was like, oh, I like that. He ended up making pictures and T-shirts and everything off my father's little picture of Mike Ditka. He also was a poet. In his later years, he became less shy and publicized a few of his poems. So the concept of New Africa, at the same time, he wanted it to be a business model. So he said, we don't have to return to Africa. We can have that here in the United States of America. We're here, like one of the wealthiest nations in the world. Why can't we have what we're yearning for, the African experience, here? So we began to draw models for businesses and center them around the mosque. And that's where the concept of the mosque here came from. You can Google that too. And if you need any of his publications, you can reach out through them. I'm actually about done. I have a picture of these pistachios, another green thing in my dad's life. I'm telling you all with personal things. His favorite snack was pistachios. And that's why I included that. He equated himself to a pistachio. So pistachios have a very hard outer shell, and you don't need it, but it needs it because the inside is so soft and smushy and nutritious and delicious, and we used to refer to my dad as a pistachio. Over his years, he was presented with honorary doctorates here and there, keys to cities, states, sat with President Carter, Bush, Clinton, and took my mom or me or my sisters along with him to the White House. And I just love this picture of him when he was conferred his first honorary doctorate. And my final slide is, if you know Imam Muhammad intimately, that's the look he gave you when you've done well. So I hope I've done well today, and I'm going to take any questions you have. I just don't have to answer them, but I'm going to defer to my friend and colleague, but I'm going to let Imam ask Imam Misbahu to introduce Ndidid Okapu, please.
One second. Sorry. For the young ones that are here, they saw a picture of a white man, in a kufi and a toga. Can we explain what that is, please?
Oh, that was the Pope. That was his picture with the Pope. Yeah.
I got this.
Yes, it was his picture
All
with
right,
the
so
Pope.
here it is.
Paul.
So when I was speaking for the young people here, in Rome, the religion is a monotheistic religion. So we are Muslims, we follow Islam. Christians follow Christianity, and there's a sect that is Catholicism. So Catholics, their leader, they have like one main really big leader. I'm talking to the children now, and that's him. That's Pope, and he's deceased now. That is Pope John Paul II. The second. He's deceased now. But my father, as a Muslim leader, he did a lot of interfaith reaching out. I mean, he wanted the Christians to know us, and he met with Jewish leaders, really big Jewish rabbis also. So that's who that is. The Caucasian man, he's gone on, he's made his transition now, and there's another pope in his place. But he's the leader of the Catholic Church. But I will take questions and keep the slides up after Ndidid's presentation, if you don't mind.
Inshallah, we will have questions after Sister Ndidid's presentation. Thank you so much, Sister Ngina, for that wonderful, intimate conversation. You didn't make it like a lecture, but just talking about Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him and grant him maghfirah. One thing that I'll quickly add before Sister Ndidid talks about Malcolm is the humility. When Sister Ngina says that Imam Warith Deen Mohammad did his best to live according to the Quran and Sunnah, I'm a witness to that. Here is a man who was a leader of the largest Muslim organizations, largest Muslim community in this country. And yet when you see him, he was always driving himself. One time we were talking and he told me, he said, Brother Misbah, I was given millions of dollars, multi-billions of dollars on a silver platter. I turned it down, rejected. He didn't want it. The mansion that he inherited, that was given to him, that his father was living in, he moved in there and said, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't, it's so much for me. He lived in a simple 3-bedroom house in Calumet City. On Cornell, down the street, 87 Cornell here. That's the house that she was talking about when he grew up. He left that mansion and moved into that house. Lead a very simple life. And when you see him, he is, matter of fact, before his death, he was planning to go to Ghana with me. Because he's always saying, I want to go and learn, I want to go and learn. And every time you see anybody who is a knowledgeable person, Imam Warith Deen did not care in front of everybody to say, my sheikh, to call you his sheikh. He was very, very humble. And did not make anything of himself in terms of, saying Imam Warith Deen Mohammad. Whenever I call him and I want to have chat with him, he would drive to wherever he said, let's meet. His favorite place that we used to meet, in the International House of Pancake, on Torrance Avenue, Lansing. You say, well, let's meet for breakfast. Very, very humble. Very, very humble. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him Jannah and to reward him for all the good that he did, and to continue to bless his family, inshallah. I will now turn to, and please, whatever questions you have, please, I hope you have them down, so when Sister Ndidid finishes, you can be able to ask. Ndidid Muhammad, Ndidid Okapu, is what I call my stubborn goddaughter. Her father specifically, see, just like I told you about how Imam Warith Deen Mohammad, gave me the go-ahead with Sister Ngina, Ndidid's father specifically called me and said, please, I want you to be the father for her and her 2 siblings in Chicago. Please be the father for them for me on my behalf. But she's that daughter who will not call me to say, I need this, I need that. So that's why I call her my stubborn daughter. Sister Ndidid has done so much in the community, very active. At one time, she was the head of the Shura committee for Imam Warith Deen's community at a young age. I don't want to say too much, but I will let her take the floor for the next 30 minutes. Meaning that Sister Ndidid, at 8:40 on the dot, Inshallah, I hope I can stop you. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. By the way, for those of you Nigerians, she's Igbo. And for the first time, you are seeing an Igbo Muslim sister. You know, you can hardly hear of Igbos who are Muslim, right? So that's our sister Ndidid Okapu. Assalamu alaikum. She's going to talk about Malcolm X, Hajj Malik El Shabazz.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد. السلام عليكم. Assalamu alaikum. So, thank you all for your patience. I had an extenuating situation today, so I'm glad I was able to make it here and be here with my sister Ngina, who's a beautiful sister. Alhamdulillah, a beautiful way to close out the month of Black History Month. I guess they said they're going to close it with the best. They're going to close it with some sisters. Just joking. I am actually a student of the late Imam Warith Deen Mohammad, a direct student of Sister Ngina's father, who my mother, Allah Yarhamaha, was a community advocate. She actually she joined the Nation of Islam in Washington, D.C., and she at MASJID Muhammad, which was a mosque that Malcolm visited, Brother Malcolm visited, and helped donate. He contributed, he was a philanthropist, with what little money he might have access to, but he helped raise money for that masjid, or Temple Number 4, as it was first established in 1937, but erected in 1960, between 60 and 63 or so, MASJID Muhammad in Washington, D.C. And she eventually wrote to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and got her X. She became from Georgetta Stokes to Georgetta X. And she eventually actually went to Malcolm's Mosque in New York, and she worked there until the Honorable Elijah Muhammad brought her out here to Chicago to serve as a secretary of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And she also served as a secretary for him, and eventually worked after the transition for Imam Warith Deen Mohammad, and until my grandfather got sick, and once she went to DC to take care of him, and got married, had a family, and eventually got an opportunity to come back to Chicago to work with the mosque cares. And when Ngina said the thing about the mosque cares, she was saying that's what Imam Muhammad said. He said he wanted the name to be the mosque cares, to show that the mosque cares about its people. The mosque cares about believers. The mosque cares about community, right? And so a lot of so much time has passed, and we're like, it's crazy to like witness it, even from our younger viewpoints, mashallah. So, I am not a Malcolm or Hajj Malik El Shabazz aficionado. I'm a student of learning and of knowledge, and I learn right along with everyone else. I'm a millennial, so I was not around at any point near his time. So I've had to learn from elders, from my mother, from family members, from respected people in the community. So the viewpoint that I wanted to take for this conversation was going to be Hajj Malik El Shabazz, a reflection on the imprint that remains, right? The influence, the thing, the ways that, and I wanted to take it from a perspective of, because I feel like there's probably more people in the room who have a better, who may have even met him or been around during his time, you know, than I was. But as I was around the time, I was alive during the time of Imam Muhammad. I was not alive during the time of Brother Hajj Malik El Shabazz. But what I've learned from community. And I wanted the reflection of not the way that we see him as an icon, but about maybe 4 or 5 ways that he has left an impact on not just the Muslim community, not just the Black American community, but the global community. So please, you know, give me some grace in my feeble attempt at this, inshallah. So I start here with, there's one more thought. Yes, okay. So I start here with a quote. Because one of the things that I thought about him was his beginnings, his humble beginnings. I'm not going to do anthology because you guys may already know all of this stuff. I want to hit it from a different perspective. But this quote from Tupac Shakur, it's like, a renowned poet and philosopher of my time. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared. And so when I think of Malcolm Little, as he was before he transitioned in his many journeys and phases and stages, I think about the grew from concrete. Because what people know and talk about when they talk about Malcolm X, a lot of times we'll hear about him young and how he was in jail, and you know the movie Malcolm X, which you know has its points and then things that it didn't encapsulate, the things that could have been improved upon, right? Kind of characterize him as this hustler gangster and all of this kind of stuff. But when you look about his origin story, for me, that was really what killed, like, it was amazing. He was, when I talked with some young kids about it, I gave the context of slavery, right? And it was crazy to know how many folks did not know about slavery and understand the conditions. So I started off with the kind of the conditions that were there for Black people post Jim Crow, the kind of conditions that brought about the thinking of like Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Noble Drew Ali, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those type of conditions, Marcus Garvey. And so Malcolm's father was he was what we would call like an abolitionist now. He was an activist and a fighter for the freedom movement, the Black freedom movement. And you can go. So I look at Malcolm as a rose that grew from concrete because he had, and I look at his return to Islam as a return to who he always was. He was the son of an activist. He was the son of, he came from a wholesome, respected family. And he grew up in violence because his father was this activist. They firebombed his home. They, you know, what I know now as an adult that I didn't understand as a youth was never let the lion tell the story of the rabbit, right? So a lot of history is told by the victors. So they told everyone that he was hit by a train or a boxcar or a runaway vehicle. His father was killed that way, but we believe that his father was assassinated because he was trying to preach Black liberation, right? And so this is the conditions. I think he was like 5 or 6 when his father was killed. And his mother at the time had 7 children, 7. And so when I look at his story, I see a lot of parallels even to the story, to some of the things that the Prophet Muhammad went through. Not to compare anyone to Prophet Muhammad, but you look at him, he was an orphan. He was orphaned by his father, which is when fatherless children in Islam are considered orphans. And then his mother, who eventually found a new partner and then became pregnant, and then he disappeared. She was traumatized by that, and then she eventually had to go into what they would refer to as an insane asylum. So, and even still through all of that, he was still excelling in school. He was still excelling in school until he got to junior high. And this is, have to bring up Sister Clara Muhammad at this point, because Sister Clara Muhammad, who comes later in the story, but Sister Clara Muhammad, who was the wife of the late Honorable Hajj Muhammad, is really, she said that she is the founder, the creator of what eventually would become the modern day homeschool, because she was very insistent that you don't let your children be taught by the very people who are oppressing you, right? Think about, if all of us have probably dealt with bullies, and we've all at some point in our lives, and especially our youth, you know, or something like that. But you think about the racism, the oppression from Jim Crow all through, and that's what people here may have experienced. We haven't, you know, we're not even getting to slavery, but just we were looking at that. You don't then take the same systems and institutionalize supremacy and have those systems be the ones that teach your children. But that's what was there for him. So he wanted to actually be a lawyer, and they told him, no, it's not a realistic goal for an N-word. Okay, so he was demeaned and diminished by these racist white teachers with no mother or father to support or guide him, and siblings that he had to help look out for. And so he turned to a way to support himself, which was, you know, the streets. Yeah, Sister said, the streets, you know, criminality. But one of the things that you'll know are getting it how you live it, hitting a lick, you know what I'm saying? But one of the things that I think Brother Umar Suleiman pointed out was that he was never, like, it was never it was petty thief. It was never anything that was violent, physically violent, because he didn't want to hurt people. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just simply saying these are the things that you'll notice about the sincerity that he's had dealing in difficult circumstances, doing the best that he could with those. And so, yes, and so that was, so that he eventually was imprisoned. And so these are some of the things that we already know about, that he, while in prison, they even called him Satan because he was like, he was giving them hell, you know, and he was, he had a, while in prison, his brother and his family members were telling him about the Nation of Islam. They were telling him about the teachings of the Honorable Hajj Muhammad, and these were things that, you know, inspired him. And, you know, they were like, at the time, he was kind of like, what is this stuff? And then later on, he was like, he was starting to find the rhetoric, or the idea that that you could put a name on the hatred, and you could put a name where there was a context for the oppression and hatred that Black people were feeling from white people, and white supremacy and anti-Black racism, right? The way that was contextualized was something that appealed to him. Is when he reflected on the people who heard him. A lot of times they were white people. So. And then also the teachings, and even my mother and others who did join the nation at the time, a lot of times, you know, the buildings, the systems, you know, my mom had said, like, I'd never seen Black folks with banks and, you know, airports and grocery stores and all of these things, the organization. I'm thinking, you know, when I talk to youth, I talk about how, you know, and y'all know this because I know my mom used to say this, you know, at the time it was like, if you're Black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. If you're white, you're all right, right? So here you have, you know, people, you know, beautiful Black people who are being ennobled to the dignity that we know that we've always deserved to have, whereas everyone else is saying, get on the other side of the street, sit in the back of the bus. You are, you know, not even a full man, you know. So 3/5 of one. So that was the that was okay. We're kind of moving on in the interest of time. All right, no, no. So in prison he studied the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he eventually got his ex. And one of the things that I think that was like always amazing about this concept of the getting your ex, you know, my mom had, you know, she was Georgetta Stokes, and like she'll like, and we'll talk about it now, but at the time, for a long time, she didn't even let people know what her name was Georgetta X, and it was like, you know, this concept of, you know, the X representing the unknown origin of your Black ancestry and history that you'll never be able to access. And so, and in 2024, a lot of us are finding ways to do that, you know, taking our ancestry test, finding out that I was always Nigerian, even though my dad was Nigerian on my mother's side. I'm Nigerian as well on that side, so look at God. Unfortunately, she never got to find that out before she passed away. But and neither did Malcolm, and neither did a lot of people. So that X meant a lot, is to get rid of that name of the white slave master who stole our people from our land. I always say that we weren't slaves; we were enslaved Africans, stolen from our home, and then brought to the States, brought to America as beasts of burden, to be worked as beasts of burden, but we were never beasts of burden. So that was in prison, and so then eventually we know that he. Hold on. So I'm not trying to give an anthology, but so I don't want to get on my soapbox about anthology, but the next thing I have in here is, hit that one. No, the audio one. So Malcolm as a revolutionary for Black freedom. So after he joined the Nation of Islam, he rose through the ranks really quickly. When you look at the history of Malcolm, he lived and died by 39. And friends of ours, we all kind of saw like a similarity. Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin, they all died by 39 or 40. And we know in Islam that 40 is like the age of adulthood, true consent. And it's also an age in which a lot of people, like most of the prophets, you know, attain prophethood at 40. And so, that I think that was really an amazing concept. So, I'm sorry, I should have given an intro who this was. So whereas Malcolm as a Black revolutionary, I thought to kind of get the perspective of people in his life who cared about him and who saw him that way. And so one of the things I think that was important was this. The other thing that I noticed was a parallel or something that he went through that was similar to Prophet Muhammad, that he never had any sons. He never had any sons, he had all daughters. None that were birthed, that lived, I should say that. And that the women in his life told his story behind it. So I wanted this Malcolm as a revolutionary, in the words of Sister Betty Shabazz.
His message to a lot of people who had lost hope was nationalistic. And he didn't want them to stay there, but to be jarred into the realization that they had a past before slavery, that they had a responsibility now, and that no one was going to give them anything, even freedom. They had to fight for it, and they had to struggle for it.
Well, when you read articles, I don't know if you read Carl Rowan, but I mean, he didn't like Malcolm X when all this was going on, but he hasn't mellowed a lot in his old age.
Now, let me just say this. You see, that was a whole group of Black people, and I think I've said this before, that white people had an agenda during that time, and it was a white agenda, okay? You know, for themselves, for their families, keeping this, barring that, meaning us, and that sort of thing. So that it was expected that white people have an agenda for themselves. However, Black people were supposed to have a white agenda. And a lot of white people who saw Black people having their own agenda as rejection, as they must be teaching hate, so that when Malcolm talked about solidarity and security and liberation and freedom and justice and that whole 9 yards, that was just totally
Mr.
You
Rowan
were
says here, he
supposed
says,
to deal
Malcolm X never
with
worked
the-
to get blacks, you know, in a desegregated school. He never went to jail for trying to win blacks the right to vote. And so that's
the same thing I'm saying. So that if you were not in integration, teaching integration, and you know, patting white people on the head and telling them how good they were, if you said really how you felt, then that was okay and that was acceptable. And white people supported that kind of leadership. So that Malcolm, on the other hand, talking and telling people you got to stand up. You know, you cannot blame white folks forever, but we must blame white folks for the present condition. But
And so I think that was a part. So I think if you heard that part, what she was basically saying is that, or what even I attended an event with Dr. Greg Carr, who's a professor of Africana Studies at Howard University. And it was talking about a scholar who mentioned that where white supremacy is most damaging is in its invisibility. Things tend to be, think about it, when we look at the news and we say, you know, something happened or whatever the case is, the person is presumed to be white unless it's stated to be black or brown or of a color or something like that. And so white supremacy in that way has been historically insidious, particularly at the time and still to this day, let's be clear, because it's been woven into the fabric of society because it's the structure in which the society was actually based and built. And I think that is one of the things when we look at Malcolm as a revolutionary, at least in the words directly of Sister Betty Shabazz, this is what he was trying to get us to understand, that we had to stand on our own, that we had to stand, that he utilized the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you know, and that got him through a lot of his trajectory, and then he transitioned out of that into the next evolution of his journey, right? But the whole crux of it is like, rise up, you mighty people, you know, you're capable, and also, you know, what is it? He said he saw Islam as one of the things that, you know, it's an eye for an eye, and also if you step on my toe, I'll chop off your foot, which is, we're not going to take this anymore. And I think that, that's the message that has resonated. Being able to speak truth to power is a way that it's resonated across the ages. And that's why we have these resurgence of Malcolm appreciation. You know, we see this all the time in different culture. You can go to the next slide. So then I think that, I'm not sure what that audio is, but I will, give me 1 second. So I want to get to, oh, for some reason it doesn't have the, so there's a slide that's missing, but one of the slides was saying another way that I view Malcolm, and I have no idea why it's missing, but it was a convert's return. A convert's return, or maybe it is, hold on. I don't know, there's a slide that's missing, but there was one that was a convert's return, right? To a revert's return, right? And one of the things that another way that I viewed Malcolm, or viewed Brother Hajj Malik El Shabazz, is his return to Islam, right? And I think that was extremely pivotal. Him taking Shahada, him, you know, getting his exit, him coming into Islam, his struggles, his story, his trajectory through the nation, through his youth, his difficult youth, his imprisonment, his transition into the Nation of Islam, his time as a Black revolutionary, his time as being open to the universality of Islam, his establishment of organizations that support the Afro unity and the universal practice of Islam, was encapsulated in the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that his life example has been one that I believe is probably responsible for untold numbers of conversions to Al-Islam. I've had so many friends, I've had so many friends. I can't even name the amount of African-American brothers who I know who came into Islam because of their introduction to Brother Malcolm because of reading his autobiography, because as people learned about his story and it was put through pop culture in the music, right, in movies, in books and things like that, they were able to identify with him as a Black man who went through difficult circumstances, and then you can understand Malcolm's politics, you can understand his race relations, you can understand all of these things, but if you really have an intimate love and appreciation for Malcolm, you're going to know that that's connected to his Islam, his religion. And so what I had, and I'm not sure why the slide's missing, but you can keep it there, my good brother Jihad Saleh, who is a government specialist with Islamic Relief, and he also is, worked on Congress and certain things. He's a pretty remarkable person in himself, and he shared this about his inspiration for coming into Islam. You came into Islam how? Or how did Malcolm influence you coming into Islam?
I started learning about Islam in the late 80s, and no doubt part of that, there was two major things happening during that. It was growing up in South Central LA, the social and economic challenges, particularly during the Reaganomic era, and then the emergence of conscious hip hop in response to that, when, Black communities were being divested from, they're being abandoned, and Black folks were struggling. And then as we needed models for people of, how to respond and, do for self, Malcolm, emerged reclaimed his spot as, the fire prophet, as the prophet of, Black power. And for a generation like me, and seeing images of Malcolm, first seeing that image of Malcolm in that BDP, My Philosophy video, and saying, who is that? Who is that person, right? And then my mom telling me, she's like, oh, that's Malcolm X. And then you tell me that story about how I was born under the picture of Malcolm X, or she went into labor at Murray Soul Food on Crenshaw, underneath that photo of Malcolm X, it's symbolically, it has weight to me. But Malcolm was clearly reading the autobiography. I read the autobiography first, the book that my mom gave to me when she read Malcolm X in a sociology class in high school, 25 years earlier. So one, I have to give thanks to my mom, because she always, even though as a Christian woman, my mom always facilitated my ability to learn about Black culture and history, and particularly Malcolm X and then the ramifications of Islam. So that's the first place, how Malcolm came to me. Through my mother, her telling me who it was, when so many people didn't want to talk about Malcolm. People were scared of Malcolm. White folks told Black people not to love Malcolm. And so my mom always, made sure that, she gave me the ability to have the independence of thought, not assuming I would become Muslim. But then in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, when I was learning about Black history, I also got into learning about religion, and that brought me to more of the religious aspect. No doubt Malcolm people can follow Malcolm because of his Black nationalism and his cultural, importance to the Black community. But those who really love Malcolm, get to know them, also know you can't truly know Malcolm and follow Malcolm unless you submit to God, that religion and spirituality is a big aspect of your life. And definitely in the Black community, that's always part of our both our weapon and our shield.
So I thought that was I had to get it from my brother's perspective, because I can name them: Kyle Ismail, Mark Crane, Jihad Saleh, so many, Jason Beasley, so many brothers, so many young men connected to his story, and that is literally consider themselves students of Malcolm. Really, he was posthumously, literally directly responsible for kind of ushering them into Islam. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who makes Muslims and determines who's going to be Muslim. But Malcolm, in this sense, was someone who kind of connected them to Allah. All right, I'm getting a hand signal from Imam Warith. So we're going to look on through to, Hajj Malik El Shabazz is a family man. And so I had this, I had this this video of Clara Shabazz, and this is something that she was saying. So I think this is another piece, right? Because when you look at people like Imam Warith Deen Mohammad and other leaders, great leaders, you have to know that there was a sacrifice on the household, right? There's the whole story about the narrative about imams' kids or preachers' kids, right? It's because you have someone who's literally sacrificing themselves. He's always traveling, he's always moving, he's always on the go, But even with that. Even with him always traveling, he always had time for his family. When he was with them, he was with them. He was connected. When you hear Sister Betty kind of talk about her experiences, she was saying, he called on me. You can look at her interviews, the interviews that she did. She said he respected me, he respected my opinion. He would often come to me to get my opinion, to get my input on some of the decisions that he made before he made these decisions. When I listened to this talk of Atala Shabazz talking about her father, she was basically saying, she said she was like, she noticed that when she met other Muslims who grew up at the time of the nation, she said they grew up in very rigid, restricted households. And the interview said, yours wasn't like that? She said, it was not like that. She said, you know, we were joking and we were playing and we were laughing and it was kind, it was gentle to me. She said, well, there was a balance. Okay, all right. And so those are the ways. The last one was going to be, you can skip all the way to this one, was an ambassador for universal Islam. So, you know, one of the things I have, alhamdulillah, so I'm closing out with my final quote then, okay? Samah the Sheikh Imam Asbahu Rafahidim Asbahu. This one quote of Malcolm's, which he says, I'm not a racist in any form whatsoever. I don't believe in any form of racism. I don't believe in any form of discrimination or segregation. I believe in Islam. And I think that's one of the ways that Malcolm's connected with so many people across the globe, and his story has resonated with so many people, because we hear it from Pakistani communities, Arab communities, sometimes even louder and more so than Black American communities. And sometimes it's like, well, what gives? And the reason why is because, you know, as he explored the universality of Islam, he was able to make those connections. I had an audio, which we don't have the opportunity to share, but of him with Imam Warith Deen Mohammad and his remarks, but I'll leave those for the question and answer period. Alhamdulillah.
Jazakumullahu khairan. Inshallah, there were two presentations, and what they did, we will make sure that Brother Ridwan will also have it on the platform so people can be able to learn from it, inshallah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Sister Ndidid Okapu and Sister Ngina Muhammad for their wonderful presentation. May Allah set our dua for you. May Allah, by virtue of whoever is here that is closer to Allah that we don't know, answer the dua and answer your prayers, inshallah. Jazakumullahu kullal khair. We thank you for that. Of Malcolm on Islam. Malcolm X, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, actually appointed Sheikh Mahmoud, in New York to teach Malcolm. So when it comes to Sunni Islam, Malcolm had teachers. There was one Sheikh Mahmoud also, who was his direct teachers. He had three main teachers who were, teaching him Islam. And he also joined a group in New York known as the it's RAM, trying to remember the, what do you call it, the acronym, but it's a revolutionary group that is a Muslim group. Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, was a member of that group. That's how she became influenced. You know, Tupac Shakur was actually a Muslim, Sunni Muslim. His mother was a Sunni Muslim. The Shakur family, after the death of Malcolm, 146 members of this group were tormented and arrested by the FBI. They were tormented and harassed because the influence of Malcolm was already there. These were Muslims, but they were Muslim revolutionaries, all right, influenced by his teaching. And what's his name? Former PRO, the organizing secretary for the Panther Party, Brown, was Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who was his original name was something Brown. H.R. Brown. H.R. Brown. This is the man who said that it's like American Pie. In other words, You know, if you have to kill white people and all of that, it's like they were not sparing it. But when they became Muslims, Islam transformed all of these people as a result of Malcolm's influence. So, Hajj Malik El Shabazz is what we should be calling him all the time. All right, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive all of them and reward them with Jannah for all that they did. The sense of humility, you can see it even in their children to this day. Time for questions and answers, please. And I'm glad you brought the question of the land that Imam Warith Deen Mohammad set aside, which tells me one thing: we are our own problems. Because all the plans that Imam Muhammad had, if he had been implemented, then we would not be talking about this today. It is within our own communities that you will find people who will sabotage the plan of the leader. May Allah make it easy for us. Yes, ma'am. And that will be our last question. We have 3 minutes to go.
Yeah,
I'd better answer this one, because if I don't answer, somebody will be in trouble. It says, we know that part of the Nation of Islam's aim was to propagate black nationalism. How does that relate to Warith Deen Mohammad's goal? How does it differ? It differs because Imam Warith Deen Mohammad, first thing he did when he took over was to say Islam is for everybody. White, Native American, Latinos, everybody was able to come into the masjid and pray with the Nation of Islam. Imam Warith Deen opened it up for everybody, and there was no racial differences in that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Assalamu alal mursalin. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. It's 9 on the dot. We made it.
2 minutes.
We thank you all for this month. Inshallah, we've been able to cover as much as we can. Remember what we said. The main aim of these sessions that we've had is the ayah of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu. We have created you into nations and tribes, male and females and all of that. For what reason? To know each other. So this session, what we've done this month, is to be able to get to know more about our brothers and sisters, African Americans who are Muslims, and to know about Islam and the role of Islam in this country. Now, the last question I want to ask every one of you to think about: is America a Christian nation?